Avowed is a game that honestly I had lofty expectations for going into it. I mean, it's made by Obsidian, one of the most beloved RPG developers of all time. One of the first RPGs I ever played and really liked back when I was getting into RPGs was Outer Worlds. On top of that, Avowed was a fantasy RPG, one of my favorite genres. And based on the trailers, it had tight first person combat, a beautiful world, and a story that seemed pretty interesting. I mean, it's safe to say that I was pretty hyped for Avowed. So now, after finishing the game in about 40 hours, I don't know how to feel about it. I want to love it. I mean, it's got everything I look for in a fantasy RPG. Avowed has some good ideas, but for everything Avowed does right, it also equally does something frustrating. I've been trying to formulate my thoughts on this game, and I keep coming back to the phrase good, not great. Everything about this game is good. It's fun to play. It has a nice looking open world. The narrative and choices are solid, but there's just something missing. So let's talk about Avowed, what it does right, what could be improved, and why I liked but didn't love Avowed. Before we begin, if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to see more content like this. Now, let's jump in. I want to open this review up by talking about the world. Avowed's world is incredibly solid. Now, in case you don't know, Avowed is set in the Living Lands, an independent island in the Pillars of Eternity universe. I mean, to put it plainly, Avowed's world is gorgeous. Unlike a traditional modern open world RPG, Avowed's world is broken up into various zones. There's a total of 4 big zones: Dawnshore, Emerald Stair, Shadowscarp, and Galawain's Tusks, each encompassing a different region of the island. I love this because each region feels tangibly different than the one before it. I loved Emerald Stair's greenery, and that contrasted with Shadowscarp's desert great. Each region provides a completely unique vibe. This also goes great in conjunction with the story. With each act of the story being broken up into these various regions, each region's story feels unique to the land that it's taking place in. The exploration is also pretty good. There's almost always an incentive to go off the beaten path to find some treasure. Whether it's some much needed crafting materials, or a new unique weapon, or even quests that are hidden due to the fog of war system that the map uses, it almost always feels worth it to go out and explore. Every part of Avowed's world feels handcrafted in this sense. Loot isn't procedurally generated. The chests are put into locations that the devs want you to go and explore. Each enemy encounter isn't random, it's placed in a part of the world that makes sense. Overall, in this respect, Avowed's world is really great. But unfortunately, it's not all sunshines and rainbows when it comes to the world. Avowed's world is incredibly static. As much as I can praise it for the beauty and the exploration, it's tough to get really immersed in it. Now look, I played this game directly after playing and reviewing KCD2, and that game is a triumph when it comes to immersion in a game world. So maybe there is some bias here, but Avowed's world feels distinctly video gamey. The cities in this game aren't very big at all. They're very akin to something like Diamond City in Fallout 4, just a small little area with not much to do except get quests from NPCs. On top of that, the NPCs in the cities themselves are completely static. It's like they were placed in a spot and don't move at all. They don't have schedules, jobs, or honestly anything that makes them feel alive. They quite literally just stand in one place, waiting for you to talk to them. It felt like I was walking through a museum exhibit. It's like I'm here in this world, moving around, exploring, learning the culture of the world, but in order to do that, I have to go to a display case and read the little sign at the bottom that explains who this person is or what they did. This world doesn't show me the importance of certain cultures or how Paradise is supposed to be the biggest city in the Living Lands. It just tells me. and expects me to fill in the gaps in my head. It's a problem I've had with Bethesda RPGs in the past, and it's a problem I have with Avowed. Look, I said this in the intro, and I truly meant it. When this game does something quite good and something that I like, it equally does something that takes me out of the immersion. I wanted so badly to get completely engrossed in the world that Obsidian built. All the bones for that to happen are there. The world is incredibly gorgeous, varied, and fun to explore, but it's the little things. The little things like having NPCs move around in the world and in the cities, having the cities actually be somewhat large and befitting of the implications they hold in the narrative. If Obsidian had nailed these parts of the world design, I would have no problem saying that this is one of the better RPG worlds I've ever experienced. But they didn't. And so I'm stuck saying that Avowed's world is good, not great. Next up, let's talk about the gameplay. Now, to me, the gameplay is broken up into two parts: the moment-to-moment gameplay and the progression. The moment-to-moment gameplay is incredibly tight, engaging, and fun, and the progression is, well, boring. When looking at the moment-to-moment gameplay, it's incredibly fun. I love the different choices of weapons you have and the various playstyles you can build out your character with. I love that you have two loadouts that you can flip between on the fly. It really gives you agency on how you want your character to be and allows you to experiment with different builds. Initially, I went with a warrior, gunslinger, mage combo. My first loadout was a one-handed melee weapon coupled with a shield, and the second loadout was a one-handed pistol coupled with a grimoire. But then, as I started leveling up, I realized that in order to maximize the abilities of my gear and player, I had to cut one of the playstyles I wanted to use. So I ended up becoming a hybrid ranger of sorts, keeping the one-handed melee and shield and transitioning the second loadout into a two-handed ranged gun. The actual combat with all these weapons feels incredibly good as well. It's so fast, fluid, and when you can combine your abilities and playstyle with those of your companions, there's a real synergy created in the combat. It's super addicting, and I never got bored with this aspect of the gameplay. But the progression in this game is rough. Unlike a traditional leveling system where the enemies scale to the level your player is, in Avowed, the enemies scale to the level of your loot. So basically, there are 5 tiers of loot: common, fine, exceptional, superb, and legendary. Within each tier, you must upgrade your weapon or armor 3 times before you can upgrade the tier that it's in. Each zone also has a max tier of loot that you can find out in the world. So, for example, in Dawnshore, the first zone, the max tier of loot you can find is fine, and the tier increases as you go through each zone. This sounds great on paper. The devs clearly want you to experiment with the different weapons and playstyles in each zone until you find the right one for you and upgrade your weapon or armor to the max tier before moving on to the next zone. But then, you get your first unique weapon towards the end of the first zone, and you learn that the easiest and best way to progress through the game is to keep the same armor and weapons you've had since the beginning and just upgrade them through each tier as you progress through the zones. The way the crafting system works in this game, it's just simply not advisable to go out and try different weapons, especially since the unique weapons, which are the ones that grant you a certain ability outside of really good DPS, are pretty rare to find, especially if you have a certain playstyle for your character. For example, I mentioned earlier that I ran a hybrid ranger playstyle with a one-handed weapon and shield. So, as I was progressing through Dawnshore, I found a really cool one-handed axe that did frost damage if you used a heavy attack on an enemy. The damage output on the weapon was pretty great as well. Shortly after that, I found a unique one-handed pistol that did electricity damage and a unique armor set and a unique shield. This combo of axe, armor set, and shield quite literally lasted me from the first zone all the way 25 hours later into the 4th zone. It wasn't until the very last main mission of the 3rd zone where I found a one-handed unique weapon better than my upgraded axe. As I progressed through each zone, I just never found a better unique one-handed weapon until then. I wanted to try something else, but I had my experience points into becoming a ranger, so transitioning to a two-handed sword tank or wand-wielding wizard just wasn't advisable. Speaking of experience points, the player progression itself is solid but not remarkable. It's your typical run-of-the-mill skill tree where you have different categories with different abilities to put your points into. Like I said, for my playthrough, I stuck with trying to max out the ranger skill tree as much as possible, with some added skill points in some of the other categories as well. A lot of the abilities boil down to stat buffs or damage percentage increases, so there isn't really a whole lot of variety in the abilities you can gain when leveling up your character. Overall, like I said in the beginning, the gameplay is a mixed bag. The moment to moment gameplay is honestly fantastic, but it's really held back by the progression. I wanted to go out and try new weapons and new shields and change my armor up, but I just couldn't justify it to myself when what I had was already just so good. And unfortunately, the lack of solid progression bleeds into the actual moment to moment stuff as well. When I've perfected my movesets with the weapons I have, by the 20-hour mark of using the exact same weapons as I did in the beginning, the gameplay does start to feel a little boring. The last aspect of this game I want to talk about is the story. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Avowed is set in the Pillars of Eternity universe, and so all of the lore from those games is present in this one. Now, I haven't played a Pillars game before, but I found that the lore implications of the story were honestly pretty easy to follow, and so I never found myself out of the loop when it came to that. Basically, the story follows you, an envoy from the Empire of Adir, sent to the lawless land of the Living Lands to investigate a plague known as the Dream Scourge. The Dream Scourge is a devastating sickness that sees the sick person or animal descend into madness, becoming a shell of their former self. The sick also get hyper aggressive and want to attack you at any chance they have. And so, you progress through the various regions of the Living Lands, figuring out where the Dream Scourge is coming from and finding a way to stop it. Along the way, you also pretty heavily get into the politics of the region, wrestling with your duty as an envoy of Adir and having the Empire of Adir's interests in mind, while also helping the people of the Living Lands and making sure that they are taken care of. It's honestly a pretty solid narrative with some pretty cool and difficult choices to make along the way. One thing that I absolutely love is the interconnectedness between the side quests and the main quests. There are times when I just completed a side quest that had nothing to do with the main story, but at the end of the main quest in a region, the side quest had an actual impact with how the ending played out. For example, there was a moment in Dawnshore, the first region, where I had just completed a side quest helping a native get their supplies back so that they could keep their shop open. It was a pretty run-of-the-mill side quest with not a whole lot going on, and so I didn't think much of it. So I went on with the game, and 5 or so hours later, I was at the last main quest in the region and needed someone to open a door for me. They were reluctant because I was an outsider from Adir, an empire that had a history of pushing the natives of the Living Lands out of their main city Paradise. I could try to persuade them using a skill check, but my skill wasn't high enough. I could try and fight them and kill them, or because I had completed that side quest earlier, I told them that I actually am on the side of the natives and helped this person out earlier keeping their shop open. Because of that, I got to bypass the skill check or fighting, and she opened the door for me because of my previous commitment to helping out the native people of Paradise. This was honestly a really cool moment that I didn't see coming at all. The side quest tangibly made a difference in the outcome of the main story without making it abundantly clear that this side quest had main story implications. And this is just one example of this happening. There were honestly a handful of other moments like this all throughout the game as well, which was really cool to see. Some of the choices I had to make in the main quest were also pretty cool. They gave me heavy cyberpunk vibes where it felt like there was no clear-cut good choice and clear-cut bad choice. Each choice felt like there were some serious consequences to be had, and that would be making some of my companions upset because of what I picked. Speaking of the companions, this is honestly my main complaint when it comes to the narrative. You have 4 companions, Kai, Marius, Giada, and Yatsli, and you can pick 2 of them at a time to go explore the world with you. I just didn't really find any of the companions that compelling. It's honestly a complaint that I have with the entire cast of characters in this game. The main villain, Inquisitor Ludwig, is kinda lame, and you don't see nearly enough of her throughout the game. The other side characters in each region also just kinda serve as exposition drops and don't really have a personality outside of that. It made it hard to care for any one person or the implications of certain decisions that were made that affected my companions. Overall, though, I will say that I think that the narrative is the most compelling part of Avowed. There are some genuine cool moments with genuinely interesting decisions to be made and genuine interconnectedness between the side quests and the main quest line. Look, throughout the writing and making of this review, I've honestly gotten genuine clarity about my thoughts and feelings about this game. I want to love Avowed. All the ideas are there, and the potential is absolutely met in certain aspects of the game, like the open world exploration and moment-to-moment gameplay and the story. But at the same time, there are parts of this game that genuinely bored me or took me out of the immersion. I want to love Avowed and I don't, but I really like it. To me, there's still genuine fun to be had for 30 to 40 hours, and I hope that a sequel gets made at some point because I enjoyed it enough to want more. Personally, I wouldn't buy this game at $70, it just isn't worth it at that price, but you can get it on Game Pass for about $20 a month, and for that price, I think if you're a fan of RPGs, it's probably worth your time. It isn't perfect, and there are genuine flaws to be had, but you can tell this game was made with love and passion for the genre. It isn't underbaked or broken. There's just some choices that I personally wouldn't have made when it came to this game, but the developers thought that was the best for it, and that's okay. That's just a difference of opinion. Either way, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you like Avowed, or if you don't like it. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Personally, I think it's a pretty good game. It's nothing crazy. I would probably rate it a 7 out of 10 if I had to. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this type of content, again, make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing. Also, thanks to y'all, I'm at 500 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for that. And I just opened up memberships for this channel. So if you're interested, consider joining. I'll be doing some pretty cool stuff on there. Whether that's giving y'all behind the scenes on my videos or giving you a shout out in the videos themselves, it would love if y'all consider joining. I also have my Patreon link down below, so if y'all want to join using that instead, that's also welcome. But yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. It's been CGG. I'm out.